Hi, welcome to Eye Openers. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week I bring you insightful conversations with entrepreneurs that will help you make more money, become a strong leader, and build a business culture that you're proud of. Grab your coffee and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Eye Openers. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If it weren't for you, the audience, this would just be a conversation with myself. Well, and my friend Stacy here. But it always is nice to know that there are listeners who find these insights valuable. Well, we usually kick this show off with caffeine because if you've listened before, you know I cannot create any eye-opening moments without the help of my friend caffeine. I am having my green juice today. I have this rule that I actually learned from a biohacking coach a while ago. He says 10, 3, 2, 1, 0. So it says no caffeine 10 hours before you want to go to sleep. So for me, I try to aim for 10 p.m. So I try not to have coffee after noon. Then no food 3 hours before sleeping because your digestion kind of messes with your, readiness for sleep. No work 2 hours before bed and no screens 1 hour before bed. And that means you'll hit snooze 0 times in the morning. So 10, 3, 2, 1, 0 is the model that I'm using here. So hence the green juice. That's my long way of telling you I'm not having coffee right now. But Stacy, how about you? What are you up to over there?
I'm a few hours earlier than you in the day being in Alaska. So I'm not quite breaking that rule yet. I have coffee, but I'm having local Harborside Highlander blend. It's one of our local Kodiak brewers and they have amazing coffee. It makes it really hard for me to follow that rule because I want to drink it all day. I hear you. I'm usually like a first thing in the morning green juice because it wakes me up and then coffee right after. And then I try and stop before noon because I'm really hyper and weird.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But sometimes, especially for you with those longer winter days, it probably doesn't hurt to have an extra cup of some eye-opening caffeine.
It does. Sometimes I just smell the bag. If I'm like, I need it.
That's a good tactic. I like that. Just come by and take a whip. That's not a bad idea.
It's just like enough of the hit that wakes you right back up.
So beyond being sounds like you are a lover of coffee like I am, there's a real reason why Stacy's here today, and it's because she's going to give some eye-opening insight to us. But a little bit about her. Stacy has a unique combination of experience as both an engineer and a marketer, which you guys, I've never seen this combo before. So watch out. Making her a stellar fit to execute marketing for technical brands. Her technical background ensures that the quality of content produced can meet the needs of a highly technical audience, which we'll hear more about in the company she's currently at. She has 10 years of experience in marketing and 17 years of experience in tech, yet she looks like she's still 25. So how do you do it, Stacy? You need all the secrets.
The filters, no.
Good stuff like
My children are probably the biggest thing that keep me young. You gotta be. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. Actually, she just turned 5 like 2 days ago. I can't even say 4-year-old and 7-year-old, 5-year-old and 7-year-old. And they force me to stay young.
Well, I hear that. I have an almost 5-year-old and a 7-year-old as well. So we certainly can both relate. But tell us a bit about this background. So like I said, I've worked with a lot of marketers and also engineers, but never in the same person. And this makes you kind of the ultimate unicorn. Tell us, how did you get started in your career and what did that transition look like?
It's a really interesting combination of purposeful and accidental. I grew up with parents that were engineers. I was naturally good at math and science, and usually those things just you go with what you know and your skill set already matches it. Great. You're in engineering school. I loved the problem solving set that came with engineering. I loved the challenge. I really enjoyed it. Once I got into the working world, I found that I was missing a lot of the human interaction component that comes when you're sitting in a room and coding by yourself. I actually decided to go back and get my MBA. But the funny part is it sounds sort of accidental, but when I was in high school, they gave us this task to write a letter to your future self. And then our teacher kept it and literally mailed it out 10 years later. It was very cool. And I had on it, I will have been an engineer for 3 years and then I'm going to go back to get my MBA and this and that. And it happened. And I had forgotten I even had the plan. But when I was in school, I fell in love with marketing. I didn't expect to. I thought to go more of the management business side. I fell in love with marketing and with writing in particular. And so after I left, it just made a natural segue into the fact that it was really easy for me to explain technical things because I understood them pretty well from my backgrounds. But it was a gap that led me there and that most marketers can't. It usually takes an engineer turned marketer to market something that's highly technical. And from there, just got more involved in more parts of everything in the business. And now I'm actually shifting even from marketing to customer service and operations as a whole. So slowly just like finding my way through different parts of the business.
Right. But I wonder if it has to do with a personal evolution that just was happening maybe in parallel at the same time as you were making these career transitions.
I think there's pieces of that. I just find that I love to understand how things work and unpack that in a way that's easily digestible for someone else. I love to say, like, how can I make things better? How can I unpack that process that isn't quite working and say, how do I rebuild it in a way that does? Which all in the end kind of comes back to the engineering like mindset, but it's an application of it.
Okay. I like that. So you just keep finding new problems to solve. That's what it sounds like.
Pretty much. And humans are the most complex problems. So that's where I think I've ended up in operation.
Right. So tell me, what does your day look like now as COO? Which problems are you focused on?
Right now, I'm heavily focused on understanding, because I'm new to my role as COO. I thrive when I can understand deeply how something works first and then back up and say, how can I make it better? So I am super focused on department by department, just understanding more about how each department and organization works, how they can work together better, right? It's hard to do that when you're in one department and like solely looking down into it. But if you're up and like looking at down into multiple departments at once, you can start to see patterns of how they could interact better. So right now I'm like 100% in learning mode, I would say. My goal is to understand how every person in our organization does their job on a day-to-day basis, how it could be more efficient, more effective, how they could like it more.
Yeah. I love hearing that you're giving yourself the space, and hopefully, your CEO is giving you the space to be in learning mode. I feel like so often people jump into a role and they want to like make their mark or make some impact to feel like they're being valuable. And they think they've got a handle on it too quickly, where if they could have stayed in learning mode a bit longer, maybe ask some better questions we could solve for the right problem. So you come in too fast, trying to do things that are too big, and it can result in more problems.
Yeah. And I mean, on the customer service side, extending that one layer farther, even to the customer, right? Just taking time to learn from the customer and talk to them and understand what they need and how we can better serve them has been a big part of my last 6 months for sure.
It's cool to hear you say, because I feel like often, and just for context, I'm coming off of like a 3-day offsite with the company and we're deep in operations. And I don't hear that team talk much about the customer. I feel like some of those back end, like HR and even COO, like often being very focused on what does the customer need. And that probably changes your perspective or how you tackle problems over there.
It hugely informs, what becomes a priority. And for me, it's probably just a result of like my wayward path to how I ended up here. I started in marketing, and you tend in marketing to want to be close to the customer to understand how to message, right? So if I know what the customer finds valuable about us, I can then market based on that. And then I shifted from marketing into customer service and success. And so I was naturally heavily focused on that, but bringing that lens to operations is probably really helpful and not something that I would have thought first to do unless I came through the path that I did.
Right. So you guys are a company, you're at Playwire right now. You guys focus on helping people monetize their ads. Yeah, this seems like the most perfect role for you, given that you come from a technical background as an engineer. You have a full grasp on marketing, and now you're going to leverage both of those strengths that you have and take them into operations. It's not often that we see someone who is like a strong individual contributor, like sounds like your history has been, and become successful at management. And, when we were talking before, I always do a pre-call with people to make sure that they're going to be the best for the show. And we had covered that, hey, sometimes we get promoted to our level of incompetence. What do you think has either been different for you and made you successful in more of a leadership role? Or what do you look for to when people are making that leap from IC to manager?
That's interesting. What's really funny is I never thought I would. I thought I was going to be that individual contributor forever. I was like, I don't need to manage. I love what I do. I love being down in the weeds. I have so much fun tinkering. I think really what shifted my mindset was, as a marketer, one of the things that I tried to learn a lot about was psychology. It made sense for my role. It's like, how do you change behavior? But I also, one of the other weird background components I have is that I was a personal trainer when I was getting my MBA, because it was always a personal passion of mine. And it was really flexible hours. So I could go back full time and work full time. So behavior change, I learned a lot of it during that role. And it fed into like a very deep interest in psychology. And so because I spent so much time learning about behavior change, about how to coach, how to teach people, and I think it naturally led me into the marketing side of things, or I'm sorry, the management side of things. And the knowledge that you can't just tell someone to change and they're going to change, which you get really well as a personal trainer, but how you have to get them to buy in and how you have to let them discover things for themselves and how to lead them down a path where they get to make their own decisions and you're not just directing and telling them what to do, which is a skill most people don't necessarily have by nature. It takes a lot of learning how to do.
Yeah. Wow. I did not know that about you. I also have a personal love for fitness and make so many analogies because there's no shortcuts there. Yeah. And you really can learn a lot about human behavior by watching people's resistance, right? People can be so resistant when just one more, just two more, and you can watch them just squirm and freak out in it or watch other people handle it really well. But it's interesting when you get at that, like, change what you eat, change your fitness or, exercise. That is some of the hardest things to do. But when we extrapolate out of that, right, the exact same thing exists in the workplace. We see people resistant to change. We see them resistant to new leaders, right? And all of that is just kind of that fear of the unknown or fear of being uncomfortable. How do you manage that as a leader in an organization to either help support them in some kind of transition? I think about this a lot, like in terms of culture. I come in and do change management, culture change all the time, and it often involves a change in leadership. How have you seen that go well?
I tend to look at it the same way I look at it as habit development, right? So when you're thinking about fitness, usually when you look at somebody who's made some major life change and gotten really healthy from being very unhealthy, they did it with like really small changes at first. They weren't trying to become a marathon runner overnight. They added small things and they felt the small victories that then would help solidify the small thing they'd already done and give them the momentum they needed for the next thing, and then the momentum they needed for the next thing. So it's figuring out how to not try to boil the ocean, but say, how do we make one small change that you're going to feel the benefits of so much that you're going to be like, okay, now I want to listen and make the next small change, as opposed to saying, hey, we're reorganizing and restructuring everything, which can be really scary. It's, hey, let's move this one person into this one role that's going to make the whole team more efficient. And then they're going to see the benefit and they're going to feel good. And they're saying, okay, now what's the next thing we could do? So it's tackling it like habit change instead of like scary, massive change.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love that. And it is consistent with what a lot of the research shows is like go after the smallest change to gain momentum or get buy-in, gain credibility, right? So all of those things fit with that. Have you ever seen it not go well? Like, have you ever been in an org that was having like a lot of culture challenges or leadership challenges and even with this tactic, it didn't go well, or maybe they tried to do the big kahuna change and that didn't work?
Yeah, I've definitely seen it's really easy as a leader to think that you know an end state without it being those small changes and to think like, okay, this is the makeover and we just need to like wholesale rip off the Band-Aid and do it, which, everybody's been guilty of trying to do that. It's like when you make a New Year's resolution, right? You're like, oh, I'm suddenly going to go from 0 to 100. And it's overemphasizing the value of making that big change. They think, okay, I'm going to change it. And then immediately that value is going to be there. Often, if the change is that big, it's going to take a long time for the value to be there. And so it's really easy to try and go whole hog, make a giant change. A month later, be like, wow, that didn't work. And let's revert it before it's had a chance to fully bake. And so it's part of the reason why I like the small change is that you can see that you're on the right path quicker. So I say, like, it doesn't take me 6 months to realize the benefits of that giant change. I did the small change and it took me 2 weeks to see the immediate benefits. So I know I'm on the right path. And so it's thinking about how big the change is and how long the time period is behind that where you're going to start to see the benefit of the change and being aware of it going in.
Right. Totally. And I've just seen people like, when you try to do the bigger project, get so lost in it. Like, even leadership who like, it was their initiative. Like if it's too big, we can get lost within it. So I really, really love this idea of baby steps along the way. And it allows you to also stop checking with your team, check in with other parts of the organization and see, hey, how are you feeling about this? It allows for those pivots in the middle if those are necessary. And it allows you to hit the pause button too, if you need to. right? At the exact same time we do these types of changes, like whether it's a reorg or for culture or leadership development, we still have to be running a business at the exact same time. And like as an ops specialist, you would know like how challenging that could be.
Yeah, 100%. There's I forget which book I read it in off the top of my head. I think it was Dark Horse. But there's this concept of gradient ascent where like if you're a mountain climber and you're trying to climb a mountain range, from the given point that you stand, you actually might not be able to see the highest peak from the range, but you can see the highest peak in your view. And so the idea is you climb that to that point, and when you get to higher ground, you stop and reassess and look around and say, now what's the highest point? I'm going to aim there. And it's continuing to do that over and over again instead of trying to say, I know exactly what that final destination is.
Right. It's a really great point. And I said, think of it as clearing fog where, we don't know, we can't see exactly where we're trying to go. Same type of analogy. But if you take 2 steps, then you have clarity 2 steps in front of you now.
Yep.
Right. And so it's just, that bit by bit makes it so much more tangible. And I just like the ability to stop and gauge the data along the way. It feels super important. I'm actually, so like I had mentioned, I was at a company offsite and we do employee listening every 6 months. And we just got their second survey back and they had incredible engagement scores, like 8% growth, which is really huge for just a 6-month. But it was those small little steps along the way, staying the course, but stopping, reassessing, is this still the right thing? In the middle of it, they invented like a whole new business model. So imagine operations was like totally crazy for 4 of those months. And they were so nervous. They're also in the middle of a tech product launch in 2 weeks. And they're so nervous about their scores because they've been working their team so hard. But I said, you guys, like you're failing to recognize there's actually a ton of value in that. People feel like they're super engaged in their job. They feel what they do has an impact and it matters. They feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And all these things can have a lot of positive impact as well. Yeah. So not just, oh gosh, don't survey my people because I've been asking a lot of them. People don't mind as long as they feel really aligned or they feel recognized by their leader or feels in alignment with the company values.
Yeah, people love to feel as though they're like fulfilling a greater need than themselves. So as long as they can see why and it's not forever, people actually tend to really like those phases of problem solving because they get to create connections with team members in those like tough situations that they have to figure out how to get through in ways that they wouldn't if they weren't challenged that way.
Yeah. So how are you guys doing that at Playwire, either within your team or organizationally?
Yeah, so we're heavily focused right now on like cross-department collaboration. And so building teams that cross those boundaries and solving a hyper-specific problem. Instead of it saying, hey, here's a problem we have, this department, your job is to go tackle it. That rarely happens in real life. A big problem a company needs to solve can be tackled by a single department. So it's breaking out these really cross-functional groups that are hyper ready to work together on a very specific task. Mm-hmm. And it creates connections between people who don't necessarily work together day to day. And it brings out ideas in a way that people don't have to try and raise them up through the ranks. So it's like this quick idea brainstorming formation about a specific thing. And so much speed comes out of doing it that way.
And so how do you guys measure if it's going well or not, or how do you know if you're getting where you're trying to go?
It's so different on each initiative, right? Because each initiative is focused on a hyper-specific thing. What we're getting in the habit of doing is saying, what's the thing we're focusing on? How does it relate to like the top level company goals for the quarter? And then what metric could we use for this specific thing to say it worked or it didn't? And so what we're trying to do is pre-build the test plan before we jump into the initiative. So we know how we're going to say, was this successful or not going out? But it's different every day.
That's so smart because if you're not, tracking it from the beginning, you won't really understand.
Yeah. And it also doesn't require that we just have like this one metric fits all thing, which does, again, never work.
So, I love that you wanted to jump on here today because a lot of people I have are entrepreneurs or maybe they just wrote a book and they want to share or whatever. But I love that you just reached out and wanted to share about your experience. What is underneath that for you? Like, why is that important in your journey?
I kind of had this moment a while back. I run like my own personal blog. And so occasionally like I'll write things that are very, very personal about my own experience. And I had a couple of people just reach out to me after and say, thank you for sharing. And I kind of had this moment of like, I didn't think anybody would even read that or care. I just like to write. So I wrote things down. Yeah. But I realized that my background in history, while I don't find them that valuable personally, I don't think of myself as somebody that like, oh, everybody cares what her experience is and I can learn from it. But there actually are more people that value it than I realized and liked that I shared, those real and vulnerable moments. And I tend to just really enjoy sharing and teaching in general. So if there's something about my experience that can help someone else get through something easier or better, even if it's just one person, I love that.
That's so great to hear. And I love that you kind of are taking that and running with it. It's so important. People are so scared to put themselves out there and whatever. And I just tell people, just go for it. I get surprised all the time. People are like, oh, I listened to that episode and it was so, meaningful. And thanks for sharing and thanks for putting that content out. And I'm like, what? I'm so glad that someone's listening. I know that they are, but it feels good to hear. And gosh, even if this just impacts one or two people, especially women who are thinking about breaking the mold and trying something different, just get started, just try it. And I promise it'll have an impact on people. So thank you for your willingness to do that. How could people find your blog? How could they read about what you're writing about?
Yeah, I tend to post frequently on Playwire's blog. So talking about the direction we're going as a company and what we're doing. You can find that at playwire.com. And on LinkedIn, you can find both my worlds meshed together. And so you just find me by searching Stacy Willis. I think I'm the first one that pops up.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure those links are in the show notes so that people can find you right away. No matter which platform you are seeing this on or listening to this on, just check out those show notes to learn more. Stacy, I can't thank you enough. It's so fun to have someone like you on and just being willing to play all out and share your story for the benefit of others. I thank you again. And thank you to the audience for diving into this episode, not being sure what you're going to learn, but I know I definitely came away with them reinforcing of the baby steps for any kind of change, whether it's personal training, whether it's a shift in your career, whether it's changing your company culture or developing your leadership. Baby steps can get you there. It creates that buy-in. It creates those really small, digestible ways to take on something big over time. Okay, to learn more, keep listening to Eye Openers. We are having a full season on culture and change management to learn more. And again, follow those show notes to hear more from Stacy. Thanks for joining us this week on Eye Openers. Make sure to visit brittanyDrose.com/podcast for this week's show notes. And if you found value in today's episode, I would so appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. This all helps to support the show.